Hey guys, Kris Jones, episode 82 of Ask Me Anything. I am getting closer and closer to my 2017 goal of 100 of these Ask Me Anything videos. I've had an awesome time. It has been a real challenge to come up with material on the one hand, and on the other hand, the material is coming very easy to me because I'm just reflecting back on the last 20, 30 years of my life and saying, how could I add value to you guys that are engaging with this series? So I did a video 79 I did on creating and delivering a kick-ass presentation, or if you're public speaking, a presentation. Then in video 81, I talked about how to deal with anxiety because I realized that I left that out of the first video. So I'm going to kind of end it with what I believe are some of the most common mistakes that I've made and other presenters have made, and how you can avoid them, most importantly. So I just did this recently when I was in Las Vegas. First one, so I have 8 common mistakes. The first one is forgetting to properly introduce yourself and establish credibility, why people should listen. See, the problem with failing to introduce yourself is that you basically break that bond that you have the opportunity to create, that you actually have to create with your audience by failing to do that. And the other thing is, you shouldn't assume, like I did, and it was a mistake, that they know who you are. Inevitably, there are going to be some people in the room that need to be reminded of some of your accomplishments and your achievements. And so keep that in mind. Make sure that you take that depending if you were introduced before you're getting on stage. But if you weren't, and the bio wasn't fully communicated, or if it wasn't communicated to your liking, you need to take that opportunity to stress those couple of reasons why your audience should be listening to you. Second thing is, one of the mistakes is that people present from a podium or they present from a seated position. And the challenge with that is that both of them, in some cases you may want a conversational approach, to be fair, but from my experience, most of the presentations are standing. So you want to make sure that you take advantage of that. You should ask the conference organizers, if you're speaking at a conference, if they could give you a lapel mic so that you could rove around the stage. The reason for that is I think that it gives you your best shot at communicating energy, excitement, and passion about the subject material. Whereas if you stand behind a podium and just simply do a PowerPoint, don't they all kind of feel the same? I mean, they don't come across as the most memorable presentations, or for that matter, the most effective ones. And for that matter, I don't know why that tends to be the standard. For those of you that have seen me present, I like to break that standard. I like to rove around. Sometimes I come out into the audience. And so just consider your options for that, is my point here. Don't be the one who just does what everybody else is doing. I've mentioned it in the previous 2 videos on this topic, but the third common mistake is just not knowing your content cold. You just need to know it cold. If you want stage fright, don't know it cold. If you want to avoid it, if you want to temper your anxiety, own the material. And don't go topical on things that you don't have a command of. When introducing yourself, you should do that in the beginning to establish credibility, but you shouldn't take more than, say, 30 seconds, 60 seconds top. Hit the highlights of your accomplishments. You don't have to go through an entire biography. Here is one that is almost unavoidable, but being aware of it and some of the common mistakes and pitfalls will be helpful, and that is mitigating common IT failures. Don't have enough time to share with you some horror stories of getting on stage and everything just falling apart from a tech standpoint, but here are some things that you could make sure of readily before you get on stage. If you're going to be using your own laptop, which is common, make sure that they have either a Mac or a Windows connector. Because if you go in with a Mac, like I have in the past, and they have a Windows connector and not a Mac, you're kind of SOL. Other thing is, always bring your presentation on a USB. A lot of these conferences will have you submit it ahead of time, and they'll say they'll have it available on the laptop that you'll be presenting from at the venue. I have seen it horrifically happen to a number of my speaking colleagues where they just couldn't find their presentation and didn't have a USB. So always bring that USB. Test the USB before you get on your flight if you're flying to your presentation. If it's local, put it in your computer and make sure it's on there before you go to the venue that you're presenting at. By the way, lack of a familiarity with the venue is another common mistake that presenters make. Imagine making assumptions about the venue, that you're going to be speaking from a podium, that you're going to have access to a PowerPoint, and it's Windows. And then you show up, there's no podium, it's a Mac connector, etc. So some of the presentations, the big ones, the keynotes and stuff that I've done, where the conference organizers have actually walked me into the venue and I could look at the surrounding where the audience is going to be, if there's a balcony and that kind of thing, walking me on the stage. I gave a keynote at the Nightclub and Bar Association in Las Vegas in March of this year, in 2017, and I had them walk me through, and I went in and I couldn't believe it, but they had two huge jumbotrons to the left and right of the stage. I was on the stage, and then in front of it, they had a teleprompter. Talk about completely removing anxiety and completely boosting my confidence level. I crushed that presentation simply by knowing what the venue was going to allow me to do. And I moved around that stage, and I had my teleprompter. It was awesome. Sixth, being way too serious. This is a real common problem because you're so attached to your material, and you know the material better than anyone in the audience, right? So you almost just, it's all about you and the material. That is a recipe for nerves and really a pretty crappy presentation. So you don't want to come across as too serious. You need to establish rapport. If possible, weave in some jokes, politically correct jokes preferably, stories and light-hearted moments when possible. I mentioned to you guys earlier that I like to, when possible, share like a family picture. That's an idea of just creating some lightheartedness within an otherwise serious topic or presentation. You guys know this. We all break this. But generally speaking, text is not as powerful as image. So you've got to avoid too much text in your presentation without pictures. And then finally, coming across as just too mechanical, which ties back into the being way too serious. You don't want to come across as mechanical. You'll be completely forgettable. You don't want to be forgettable. You need to be conversational. This is another common thing, but you just really need to avoid it, is reading from your presentation. I mean, that is your ultimate crutch. Some of the tips and strategies that I gave you guys to mitigate anxiety are preferable than simply reading your presentation. I could promise you, if your presentation's all text, it's 12 to 15 slides like I recommend, and you just stand up there and read it, you'll survive. You won't get stage fright, but you probably won't get invited back. Most likely, the audience members won't connect with you and won't have much recall of the material. It is a recipe for coming across as a mediocre to poor speaker. Avoid it. Don't want to have too many slides unless you're a visual presenter and you're a professional. I've seen my one buddy, Marcus Tandler, does a presentation in 30 minutes or less with 200 and some slides. The guy is a cyborg. He's a superhuman. Don't try to do that unless you could pull it off. Generally speaking, too many slides is a recipe for not getting to all of your content. I have found, once you get above 20 or 30 slides, if you're only allotted 30 minutes or less, you'll never get to the slides. You almost have to allow 1 to 2 minutes for each slide, and you just do the math. And you can't get there unless you rush, and you don't want to rush because you come across as too mechanical. Finally, the thing you need to avoid is letting your nerves get the best of you. Just can't do it. You need to use some of the techniques, the mantra concept, using a water bottle, using the pause like Bill Clinton or whatever else, so that you can maintain your confidence level. Guys, I will see you in episode 83. Peace.